Welcome. You're listening, or perhaps you're watching on YouTube, the next episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. And today we have Nick Tabor joining us. Nick, how are you today?
I'm fantastic, man. Better than I deserve on this beautiful day. Thank you for inviting me, as always, for
Absolutely.
what's got to be the 3 dozenth time I've been on here by now.
I don't know. You're catching up to Craig and Victor. We're gonna have to maybe do some math to figure out who's been on more.
Yeah, I don't even know, man. I'm just happy to be here. That's all.
It's great. It's great to have you. But before we get into our chat here, we're gonna make sure to let all of our listeners and viewers know some of the things we do here at Whistlekick. We do a lot. Obviously, this podcast is one thing, which we release twice a week, over 1,000 episodes at this point. All of those episodes are available for free on whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. You can go there and find out information on all of the episodes, show notes, transcripts, photos, all kinds of stuff you can find there. You can also click our subscribe tab to get notified of all of the episodes as they come out. On YouTube, make sure you smash that subscribe button, that like button, like this video. All of those things really help us out in those algorithms. We know how important those things are. But this podcast is but one thing that Whistlekick does. We also sell merchandise. I've got this Whistlekick t-shirt that I'm wearing, hats and sweatshirts and training programs and events. And you could, if you're a school owner, you could join Whistlekick Alliance. There's so much stuff that we do, and you can find all of that stuff over at whistlekick.com. And if you use the code podcast15, you can save yourself 15% off almost everything over there, including books. So all kinds of stuff going on over there. But today, Nick, you and I are here without a plan.
Yeah, just to be.
We're just going to chat martial stuff. We both were at a major martial arts event for us this past weekend, weekend ago.
Yeah.
As of recording this, we were at All In Weekend. We went through so much stuff there. And I thought, you know what? Let's have Nick on and just do another martial things episode. And let's just talk martial stuff.
Yeah. I'm happy to do that, man. I did have a prompt on something that I was curious what your thought was.
All right, let's go there.
So, small story on this. Years back, I was attending a college graduation, and this was like right around 2006, 2007. You guys do the math of how long ago that was. I'm not going to.
Keep going, Nick.
And the valedictorian gave the speech, and one of the things that stuck with me is he said, "This generation is the first to play Nintendo, last to play Atari." So,
interesting.
Yeah, really just symbolizing the push in technology. So, my question with you, at least to start, I'm curious about, how do you feel technology has improved the martial arts teaching experience and martial arts in general?
So that's a really interesting question. Like when we meaning you and I, when we started training, because we're roughly the same age, when we started training, there basically wasn't technology for martial arts, right? There was magazines.
Yeah.
There were, some TV shows. The internet was starting to exist, but it wasn't what it is today for sure.
Right.
And even, technology with video games, like there were some, martial art video games, but it wasn't big. It wasn't mainstream like it is today. Now, fast forward, you can use the internet in such a different way. I'm not going to say that you can learn martial arts strictly through the internet, but I bet some people have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Whether it's through watching YouTube videos or researching things, there's so much more available at our fingertips. And even the technology of, and those of you that are watching on YouTube will see that I'm holding up my phone, right? When I was a kid, cell phones were these big clunky things that you only had if you were super, super, super rich. Like nobody had cell phones, right? They weren't even called cell phones. They were mobile phones. And usually they had to plug into your car, and it was this big honking thing. And, when I even fast forward, 10 years later, like out of high school into college, when cell phones became more popular, it was a flip phone, right? My phone was a flip
Right.
phone for years. You couldn't do on that phone what you can do with cell phones today, right?
Right.
So I can use my phone in, even if it's just recording myself and watching it back later.
Yeah.
So I think it has helped a lot. Now, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the bad side of what technology brings to us today, in that uh, it allows people to troll other martial artists in
Yeah.
a way that isn't helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see that a lot on TikTok, especially, where if I put a kata up there and, like, is this, and I get the phrase McDojo, or a lot of things come up, and in reality, I just delete them, and just say, like, no, this was not my thing. I want to add one thing to that I think has been an improvement a lot, with it, because with martial arts, I think the technology, I feel, has made it more accessible.
Mm.
And growing up, and I mention this sometimes when I'm on here and recorded, I got to get the actual book, but I have the book somewhere in this office that I was given the day that my original school with Giffords Academy, when I was an underbelt, I was given, here's the book of all the forms
Hmm.
written down and everything there. So you had the ability to look at it, read it, and then if you wanted to go try to test for a stripe or say, hey, I think I figured this out. Is this okay? There was an advantage there, but also I had a mild dyslexia issue at the time as well. So I would sit and read a prearranged one step, or read the kata, or read the steps over and over and over and over again until I knew what it said, but I couldn't visualize it, you know. And nowadays, when we do that, I've had students where, in order for them to learn, and sticking on katas for a moment, where I would do the form and then they would go home and practice and then watch me on their phones and go, oh, okay. Oh, that's the next move.
Hmm.
And then they'd be able to, because it's made us more universally accessible. And I also think one of the things that I've experienced, because I've done this for a while. Quantitatively, I can't remember the exact amount of years I've quote taught, but I've been in the martial arts since 1991. So 34 years roughly at the time of recording this. So, but when I started teaching, it's people went to the dojo, and then there was a mysticism about the teachers or about the sensei. And naturally you put them on a pedestal. And you find out something about them, and that would cause some problems or something. And like even like you'd say with wrestling, that's where like kayfabe happened.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So I think it's also made people much more accessible,
Hmm.
is where you could see this, but it's also, I see a lot of shift in teaching, because I'm not the sensei anymore, and you guys have done this with whistlekick a lot. I'm not the sensei who has no issues. I've been upfront with a lot of things that I've had in a lot of my past. It's out there.
So you're human.
I'm human.
Yeah.
Ain't that amazing? Ain't that amazing? I'm human. Like,
Yeah.
but when we're human and we're human beings, we could show all that I've learned has led me to here, where you could say, look, all that I've learned has helped me deal with a lot of problems, and let me show you how to apply it,
Hmm.
which is a very different thing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to not agree with that. And it makes everybody more accessible. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, think of it this way: when you and I were starting out, there would be it would be nearly impossible for us, where we were living, not impossible, but really, really difficult for us to communicate with someone like Bill Wallace
Yes.
or Cynthia Rothrock
Yeah.
or Don Wilson or any of these at the I'm going to say at the time they're still big name martial artists, but like they were they were on the magazine covers, and like
Yeah.
how would I have as a kid been
Yeah.
able to interact with those martial artists?
Right.
It's not going to happen. There's maybe I write them a letter. The chances of them writing me back, maybe depending on the person, their personality, maybe,
Right.
but that would have been the only way, would be to write them an actual letter, because email didn't exist, right? There's no Facebook didn't exist. But now these martial artists, well, and pause, I'll even back up even further. Bill Wallace, I know, came to New England and did seminars,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't in a school that knew anything about them. So how would I have known that he was in my area teaching a seminar? My school didn't
Exactly.
know about them. So
Yeah.
even if they were in my area, I couldn't connect. Now, these martial artists, and not just those martial artists, but like big time, like Jesse Enkamp, right? He is a newer,
Right.
different generation martial artist, but he's quote big and famous now, right? Everybody, not everybody, karate nerd, right? Everybody knows who he is.
I do.
And although it's not to say if I find his email, I'll email him, I'll get back. But just the fact that technology exists, I can look at his website and see where he's teaching and be able to go and then get access to him. And in some cases with these martial artists, yes, you can send them a message on Facebook and they might respond to you. Like, so everything is so much more accessible, whether it's direct one-on-one talking with these people. And, being the producer of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, this is how I contact a lot of these people, which in the 90s would have been so much more difficult to do. And, getting access to them for their trainings, it's just so much easier because they can put on their website where they're going to be. And now I know and can get information.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. And even just taking it at a more granular level, most of the people I've met, even being affiliated with Whistlekick Martial Arts, I never would have been even possible. And I believe in some way that the universe is laid out a few steps ahead. Even if none of this existed, some ways we would have crossed paths. Like you and I, Andrew, or even myself, Jeremy, Jenny, Sifu, Steve, or even any of the others that have happened. And do you think that's also one thing that has improved a lot? Because I'm thinking like when I was a kid and the dojos that I was in as an underbelt were a result of the fact that they were in the phone book and we happened to know somebody. My dad was in a well-connected industry at the time, and the first one I went to, he happened to saw. He was a parent of one of the kids who went there was a customer of his,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, "Hey, Tommy, you guys went to Tiverton Taekwondo? Yeah, we're still there. How good is it?" But it just so happened to be when I was driving down, there was a sign that had Ninja Turtles, and I wanted to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was on Sunday mornings and the dojo was closed, so I got to watch the Turtles too. But side point, at least for that, I think when you have it as it's an embracing of what we have now
Mm-hmm.
as well, like with certain things that even like myself, some days my body might not be 100%. And I think all of us were at that. I mean, you're at that point right now, but
Yeah,
at
absolutely.
least we have an opportunity. We can go onto YouTube, and if I'm teaching something, even a basic side kick, front kick, and I'm like, okay, I can't do it, but here's how you do it, and visually show, okay, see that technique? That's what we want to. Okay, then they can do that and still improve.
Yeah,
Yeah,
everything is so much more accessible. Like,
yeah,
you're alluding to the fact that I had foot surgery, right? I can't
yes,
really walk
yeah,
much. I mean, I can walk, but I can't can't do what I could before. I'm not currently able to go to class. My ankle won't allow movements of that caliber. And if this had happened when I was a kid, there were still ways I could have been, training, working my mind. Podcasts didn't exist.
Right. Yeah.
Books absolutely existed, but
Yeah.
there were way less of them then than there are now.
Yeah.
And the access I had to them would have been, I hope my library has them.
Right.
The bookstores certainly didn't carry a lot. Now, magazines,
Yeah.
yes, there were a lot more. I actually would say probably there were a lot more magazines then than there are now.
True.
And I'm talking print magazines, right?
Right.
There are probably way more online martial arts magazines now, but I'm talking actual print magazines. There were probably more back then, but they came out once a month, or in some cases, there's one I knew that came out 4 times a year. That's it. So if I was laid up at home, I could read about martial arts. I could go to these magazines and read things, but the quantity that I had available to me was much, much, much more limited. Now I'm laid up at home and can't walk in my case, I couldn't walk for 6 weeks. And then another 2 weeks, I was only hobbling. So we'll say 8 weeks of being basically housebound.
Right.
I still had so much martial arts at my fingertips and available to me, and so many more books that I could read, and so many podcasts that I could listen to that just didn't exist back then,
Yeah. Which is a good shift to my next point.
Yeah.
Because you're setting it up real easy. I mean, podcaster to podcaster, it's basically like playing t-ball sometimes. We're vibing well. The ball's on the stick. Go, brother. Go. When you're teaching, and as well as like with the martial art, I think, we are not going to have a Bruce Lee type anymore. We're not going to have that figure. But I think people try to fill the void to be the grand martial artist, to like envision of now. I think the closest might be more lore than anything, but might be like something like Chuck Norris, or anybody like that. But where we try to build the grand plan, because we are the curators of the martial arts for as long as possible, and then when we leave this realm of reality, the next people take over and it evolves. Now we try to make the grand thing, or make the grand seminar, class that could really have that big impact. But would you agree that even with this day and age with technology, that even the little moments make a more lasting impact than the grand plan?
Yeah, I can see that. I could see that. I also think, you mentioned the Bruce Lee thing. I think we will never, and this is just an opinion, I don't think we will ever have another Bruce Lee.
No,
I don't think anyone will ever get there. And I think you're making the correlation to Chuck Norris as probably the closest we have right now. And when Chuck Norris unfortunately passes, I don't think we will have another Chuck Norris.
No.
And I'm talking just the amount of fame and recognition that those two martial artists have. I don't think will ever be something that we would find again, ever.
No.
And it's not that I'm saying, and I want to be really clear, it's not that I'm saying we will never have another martial artist that is as gifted as they are. And they were both Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee were both very gifted martial artists. I'm not saying we won't have gifted martial artists. We have since then. There are lots of martial artists today that I think honestly are still as gifted as both of those individuals are.
Right.
And some people might feel differently about that than I do, and that's okay. But I'm talking about the fame and the recognition that those two martial artists have. I don't think we will find that ever again.
And that I agree with you, and I think from where we are, like going from the metaphor of being the first to play Nintendo, last to play Atari
Mm-hmm.
type thing, I think we try to create these things or this school, or we want to naturally do it so we can get to that level. And we can do something like even Billy Banks as
Mm-hmm.
well, the type of, who had, like shot up and did really well. And then he's still out there. People who may not know his name, but know when you have more aerobic style martial arts drills, it's most likely from him.
Sure, but
You know?
here's where I would, I don't want to say disagree, but like here's the thing to think about.
Hmm.
I can go to a 16-year-old kid and ask them
Yep.
who trains martial arts, who's Billy Blanks? No clue.
Yeah.
16-year-old kid trains martial arts, who's Chuck Norris? They know who it is.
Yes, I agree.
Even someone who's in their 30s who does not train martial arts,
Mm-hmm.
who's Billy Blanks, even in their 40s. And I asked this question of someone recently.
Yeah.
Do you know who Billy Blanks is? They're not a martial artist. And this person said, who's Billy Blanks? And I said, he created Taibo. It was, kind of the first cardio kickboxing type program in the 80s. And they're like, I kind of maybe vaguely remember that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask a martial artist in their 40s who's Billy Blanks, they're going to know who they are. You ask somebody in their 40s who Chuck Norris or Bruce Lee is, they know who that person is.
Right.
So I really don't think anyone has the recognition that those two people have amongst younger people, whether they train martial arts or not. They know who Bruce Lee is. They know who Chuck Norris is. I don't think we're going to get that again.
And with that legacy mindset, knowing that, we're probably not, it's highly unlikely we're going to be here, should we strive for the small impacts in the moment more than and this is kind of a softball thing, but
yeah. I mean, I think for sure. I think we as martial artists will be able to connect, I think, better with our audience that's paying attention to us than trying to lob the big fastballs and trying to try and be the Bruce Lees or the Chuck Norris. I think we are going to be able to interact better with those that are closest to us.
Exactly.
Yeah, and some might see that as a smaller impact, but that impact might last longer.
And that small impact, if I can add to that small impact will resonate even further.
Yep.
Because with you and Steve Watson talked about retention a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm a firm believer that tiny moments build relationships. And you use a metaphor of small drop in the pond creates the big ripple, or anything along that line. But I think when you look at what the lessons are with martial arts, there's like back to, when technology wasn't as abundant and democratic as it is now, and democratized, I should probably say, but when it wasn't as abundant as it is now, you had to stride, but there was a mysticism to the art. So you had this and you had to do it. I think now we have to be more open about what the lesson is. So like when you shift and pivot, how that can translate to the next thing, or shifting and pivoting in real life. And like, to be open about that, I think would attract more, but and again, going back to being more human as teachers. And I think that's a big part of it. And there was like a story, and one person in the event we went to with All In Weekend gave me permission to talk about it. I won't use her name, although we both know who it is. So, young girl coming in, operates very high strung, very nervous. And she came to me and she's looking, and, we partnered up. We started doing a Tagume drill. And she's like, okay, oh dear, oh geez. And then I said, you nervous? You okay? She's like, no, I always operate very nervously. And we're going through it. I said, okay, let's work with each other. I'm nervous too. And at the end of it, we bowed. I said, hey, nervousness shows you care. And you could see the look in her eyes. Suddenly she got really wide-eyed and the boundaries went down.
Yeah. Yeah.
and that little moment of shift and a little shift in perspective.
Hmm.
It was just
Yeah.
why you shift when you want to punch, why you shift to throw your body weight because you have more power now. You shift the perspective and then change that way.
Well, and I think it's important when you give someone permission
Yeah.
to have a feeling,
Mm-hmm.
it empowers them.
I agree.
I tell students all the time,
Yeah.
whether it's martial arts or drumming or whatever, that it's actually okay. I think it's okay to be nervous.
I
Like you
agree.
said, being nervous shows you care,
Yeah.
right? You want to do a good job. Okay, I get that. I think the problem that some people have is that nerves can turn to fear,
Exactly.
and fear brings on either fight, flight, or freeze,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
fear can be crippling,
Yeah.
but nervousness can actually help focus people. And I think when you give people permission to have those feelings, it changes something for them for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned drums, and one of the things I did want to ask you about it from your perspective as a musician.
Hmm.
Is there value in using music when you train?
So that's interesting. So if you listened, for those people listening right now or watching, if you listened to my Martial Things episode with Stephen Watson, we talked about music. And I have never come from a school that uses music in the dojo. And so, we as students learn what we pick up what we learned in the dojo. And so I never came from a school that had music in the dojo. And so for me, when I'm teaching, it's very maybe off-putting isn't the right word, but
Mm-hmm.
I have been in training environments where music is happening, and it's a little unsettling for me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because I am a musician. I focus on the music. And so if I'm listening to the music, I am not paying as close attention to the person teaching.
Yeah.
And I think it pulled for me, and this is a personal thing, it pulls me out of the training in a way that I don't like.
That's interesting that you say that. And I mean, I listened to the episode and you said some things like that. And I think if we get a little more like at the granular level of it, to where I was the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I went from one dojo that was completely quiet, and you could hear it was the first one, the first iteration of it was in a town, Tiverton, Rhode Island, middle of nowhere. You could hear the activity in the woods,
Mm-hmm.
across the street. You could hear that. Then going to a dojo that had music set up, and would have and Sensei would be more concerned about what CD to put in sometimes. But I'm not going to get into that. And I think when you look at it, there's things with you can also teach an application from technology
Mm-hmm.
is where the element of distraction could come in from where your focus is, but it also takes some prep. So I would do this, and I started doing it. There's a couple of songs that I use. And by the way, with anybody perspective who would teach for me, like any kids who teach, the parents get a set list of everything always. So it's like, if you have any objection to it, tell me. If not, I'm using it.
Mm-hmm.
But an open, honest conversation, which again is another way technology is interesting because text messages can happen in the middle of a dojo,
Yep.
in the middle of a lesson, But there has to be the boundaries have to go up. So I have a class where I teach a couple of teenage boys.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to do that, and I did this the other night, we're practicing sidekick drills, and there's a ballet bar on the wall. And, so we use this. So we're practicing sidekicks, and I throw Taylor Swift on. It's okay. And naturally, you're probably thinking with the dynamic, teenage boys and Taylor Swift don't mix at all. Don't mix. And
Yep.
it did not. Like, It did not at all. So they're doing this, but then showing them, okay, when that is, you're either going to find the rhythm to do it at a certain speed, or what you're going to do is learn how to block that out. Because in the day and age now, you're going to have distractions. You're going to have
Sure.
something come up in front of you that you're going to have to pivot, shift, and move somewhere else. So get used to it now because, and I'm like, I'll usually joke about it. Get used to this now because this song is absolutely fire, and we're going to
Yeah.
put it louder, and we're going to put it louder. And the other places in the space that I rent, they'll look at it, and then some instructors will look kind of strange, but then get it later. It's also good because I use one song like David Brubeck's "Take 5."
Mm-hmm.
If you're a drummer, you probably know that song right away.
Yep.
So do you hear that, or people who don't, go out on your Spotify, type that in, and you'll hear what I mean. But if it's where I want them to do it slow, or if I'm teaching sparring for the first time, I'll put that on to just decrease the egos.
Yeah.
But
And there's, we talked about this at All In Weekend that, taking different variables or scenarios or situations, or putting you in different scenarios and situations, and changing some of those variables
yeah,
absolutely change things. So, you mentioning Taylor Swift, we're going to turn it up louder so you can learn to block it out, because in an altercation out in the real world, it's not going to be silent, right?
exactly.
Sure, absolutely, that makes sense.
Yeah,
And on that same vein, when you come into, and I've done this with students, and I've been in classes where my instructor's done this, there is zero talking.
right.
Like, he actually dimmed the lights so it wasn't pitch black, but it was like dimmer. It was mellow. It felt mellow, and there was zero talking, and everybody picked up right away. Okay, great. Okay, he's not talking. He's teaching, but isn't giving any verbal cues or commands whatsoever. And it changes your mindset, and
Right.
it allows you to focus in a slightly different way. And I think that's an incredibly valuable tool. Um, so yeah, I totally get it. I agree wholeheartedly.
Nice, man. Nice. So my thing that I want to ask the musician
Hmm.
as well, what is a song that you would use to train for yourself?
That's interesting because, again, it's such a foreign concept to me to have music on while training,
Yeah.
because it's just not something that I'm used to. And so I think I would have a hard time answering it. I mean, it's going to be music that I enjoy listening to. So, I mean, what do I enjoy listening to? I think I could probably answer that question better by saying, what do I not enjoy listening to much, right? I'm not a big country fan.
Mhm.
I'm not a good modern pop fan. So, Taylor Swift, for example, it's modern. I'm not into that. I'm in my late 40s, so I'm a classic rock guy.
Yeah.
Because I'm involved in the Celtic music scene, Celtic rock, Celtic folk, that kind of stuff. I enjoy quite a bit. Musicals, believe it or not, I love listening to musicals. I think they tell such a great story. Not into like electronica, EDM, electronic dance music, that kind of stuff. I'm not into rap.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know that I could give you a specific tune. It's like when you work at a okay, back up. Young people listening, there used to be these stores that you could go to and you could rent a movie, whether it was on a VHS tape or maybe a DVD.
Yeah.
Okay, those existed back in the day.
Yeah.
And I used to assistant manage a VHS store, and it was a rule that you were not allowed to ask us what our favorite movie was. You
Yeah.
can't ask someone who works at a movie store what their favorite movie is. You just can't do it.
Right.
On the same vein, you can't ask a musician what their favorite song is, because it's too broad. So I don't know that I could give you a definitive answer on what music I would train to solo.
I think that's really super interesting that you say that because my thought always is when it's something that is super important to me And like, if, for example, when I was training and when I haven't competed with tournaments for a while, saying this as the tournament director for whistlekick martial arts, I haven't competed in a while. I've administrated a few and judged a few, but it's I would always train to something that I did not like in order to use that, as I said, with Taylor Swift and my kids. I would do something in order to block it out so I could be in my own thing, in my own realm. So it's something like back in the 90s where it would be some form of gangster rap on my Walkman, which would mean I'd also had to do this. And I'm going to one up you when you said now kids, right? Now kids, there were times where you had a Walkman which had a CD. A CD was a disc where you had it. You couldn't go on there and tap on Spotify. You had to pay for that. Had the Walkman, which had earphones attached to wire into your pocket. Try doing a roundhouse kick and keeping your ears in place. Barely happened,
Yep.
Barely happened. But I would buy that single CD. Now, kids, I would buy that CD with one song that would have, probably for $3-4, and play that one song over and over again, or something along that line, or or whatever that happened. And sometimes I'm not a fan of country either, but I would find the guttural country. My ex-wife walked back into my heart but never wiped her shoes type, or my truck died yesterday and now I'm going to its funeral type country, and find that, and, then would be able to focus better. And I think, really going back to like with technology, I think that also opens up the perspective as well. I could bet I would perform using that same method that I did. I would probably perform better at a tournament as a competitor now than I did back in, 94 or wherever I may have done that. 94 random day. But it's just, I'm curious about it when I said that, and I don't ever ask a musician about it. It's like never asking, like asking a cinephile what the favorite movie is, or asking a martial artist, have you seen Jackie Chan? Yes, we have.
Awesome. This was fun, dude.
This was, man. This was great.
Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's always great to sit down and talk. To talk. I was going to say chat. So chalk is a combination of chat and talk. It's always great to get together and chat with martial artists just about martial stuff. That's the whole thought process in doing these martial things episodes. And so I definitely want to thank you for coming on.
And now, kids, what chalk was the thing that you had to write on the wall with when you were kids.
Yep, and the best job ever that you could be given in school was to take the chalk erasers and bang them on the side of the building outside.
Yes.
Nick, thank you so much for being here. I really
Andrew, thank you as always. Anytime I get the opportunity, when he's like just technologically tapping my shoulder, saying, "Hey, can you come on?" I'm in, man. I'm in as always.
I hope you, the listener, got something out of this episode. We certainly rambled. We ran around a bunch of things, and maybe it made your gears turn a little bit. And thinking about, your training and music, or how technology is involved in your life now, in regards to your training. Let us know what you thought of the episode. If you're on YouTube, first off, after you've hit the subscribe button, after you've liked this episode, put a comment in the on YouTube about what you thought of the episode. We'd love to hear from you. If you are so inclined, head over to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com to find out all the stuff about this and all of our episodes. Subscribe to our new newsletter. It is only for martial arts radio. Every episode that comes out, you'll hear about it. And I will be sending some really cool extra bonus special stuff. You do get a free book when you sign up right away, so that's cool. And then whistlekick.com for all of the stuff that we do whether it's training programs, books, apparel that you can purchase, all of the different events we mentioned. Nick and I were at All In Weekend, Marshall Summit, Free Training Day, all free training days. All of these things you can find at whistlekick.com.
And
So,
too.
What's that?
And tournaments too.
And tournaments. That's right. We now have tournaments as well. So Stay tuned for more of that stuff coming soon. And until next time.
Oh, man. Train hard.
Smile.
And have a great day.